My son handed me a cup of tea and smiled like it was peace. But that same morning, I found my signature on a deed I never signed. Selling off the land I broke my back to keep. If this is a revenge story, it didn't start with poison. It started with forgetting who built the home you want to steal. The sun hadn't even burned off the Kansas fog when I found the envelope, stuffed behind the electric bill and the feed store coupon. I recognized the county clerk's seal before I even opened it. A deed, already signed. My name printed in black ink, looping and too neat to be mine. I didn't remember signing anything, because I hadn't. 30 acres, gone. I just stood there, barefoot on the porch, coffee cooling in my hand, the old screen door creaking behind me as it always did when the wind blew from the east. That land wasn't just property, it was my life. James and I planted every tree, dug every fence post, raised David with blisters on our hands and dust in our lungs. I sold my wedding band in '91 to pay for David's tuition. James went without pain meds for a week when his back went out, just so we could fix the roof before tornado season. Every sacrifice etched into this dirt, and now my own son had signed it away, without a word. Just as that realization settled in my chest like a stone, I heard his boots on the porch steps. "Hey, Ma," David said, too cheerful. He held out a mug. "Made you some of that herbal tea. Good for your nerves." I took the cup, warm, gentle smelling, like lies and lavender. He smiled like he hadn't just erased my name from my land. That smile used to mean scraped knees and bedtime stories. Now it felt like a curtain pulled across a stage, hiding the act behind it. "Thank you," I said, and sat down slowly in my rocking chair. I didn't sip. Instead, I stared out past the fields that had turned gold with age. My knuckles stiff from arthritis curled around the cup like it was a weapon, not a gift. The land was quiet, but so am I. And when the wind shifts, sweetheart, even wheat knows which way to lean. He forgot who kept this place alive all these years. He forgot what I gave. But I didn't. And I wasn't about to disappear just because someone else thinks they can write my ending. I went out to the barn that afternoon to sort through the old storage chest James built. Same one we used to keep his tools, my garden records, and bills from years gone by. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just needed to move, to breathe. But sometimes the truth hides where memory lives. Tucked between 2 seed catalogs and an envelope of dried marigold petals, I found it again, the deed. Same one I saw that morning, only this copy had David's notes scrawled along the side in pencil. "Transfer pending, agent confirmed, will handle POA soon." My hand didn't shake, not then. My breath did. He hadn't just forged my name, he'd planned the next step. Power of attorney, total control. Back inside, I sat down in the kitchen and stared at the tea he made me. Still warm, I hadn't touched it. I poured some into a mason jar, screwed the lid tight, and wrote on the label in shaky cursive, "Sample, April 12th. Let me ask you something, just between us. Have you ever realized someone you raised, someone you protected, sees you now as nothing more than a legal obstacle? Because I did, right there, with my hands still smelling like soil and rosemary. David came into the kitchen like nothing was wrong, called me Ma again. That word used to feel warm. Now it felt strategic. "You restin' okay lately?" he asked, eyeing the empty cup. "I can make another." I smiled soft and said, "Oh, I feel a little tired these days. That tea must have helped." He smiled too quickly, like a dog who's hidden a bone. He thinks I'm fading. He wants me to fade. Later that night, I heard him talking on the phone through the guest room door. I didn't catch it all, but one line clung to me like a burr. "She's not all there anymore. We'll get her to sign everything soon." I went out to the porch, sat under the stars, and watched the wind move through the wheat like it was whispering. You know, we spend our lives giving, our time, our health, our silence, and somehow, when we slow down, they call us burdens. But I'm not fading, and I'm not done. He can write my name on papers, but he'll never write me out of the truth. The next morning, I took the mason jar to Beth. She used to run the small-town pharmacy before the chain stores came in. Now she works out of her home, mostly helping women like me figure out what's safe and what's not. She didn't ask why I brought tea in a jar, just took one look at the label, April 12th, and nodded. "Something's not right, huh?" she said. I nodded once. I didn't drink it. She set it gently on her counter like it was an old relic, then pulled out her test kit, vials, strips, dropper bottles. I watched her hands move, steady as ever. Beth had delivered 2 of my grandchildren. She once pulled a nail out of James' thigh when he fell off the roof. I trusted those hands. When the strip turned light blue, she stopped, looked at me over her glasses. "Sedative, low dose. Not enough to knock you out, but enough to cloud your head." I said nothing. Then she added, almost gently, "Keep taking this, and soon you won't trust your own thoughts." That's when I felt it. Not rage, not panic. Grief. But not the kind that makes you cry. The kind that settles into your bones. The kind that tells you you've already been erased and no one noticed. David, my boy, my only child, was slowly unmaking me. Not with fists, not with threats, but with tea and sweet voices and a plan. A quiet kind of cruelty. He wasn't just taking the land, he was taking me out of it. I walked home the long way, past the windmill James built, past the wild roses I planted the year David was born. Everything I touched still stood, still mattered, but somehow I didn't. He'd left me off birthday calls, ignored the surgery last year, sent a Mother's Day card late and unsigned. I'd swallowed it all like bitter medicine. I told myself this is what sons do. They drift, they forget. But this wasn't drifting. This was a decision. That night, I sat by the fireplace with James' old ledger in my lap. On a fresh page, I wrote, April 13th, confirmed sedative in tea. David orchestrating, pushing POA, playing the long game. Do not confront yet. I underlined that last part twice, because the worst part of being forgotten isn't the silence. It's pretending you don't notice. But oh, sweetheart, I notice everything. I don't remember the exact moment it shifted in me, but I remember the stillness. It was a Thursday. The sky had that heavy Kansas gray like it couldn't decide if it wanted to rain or not. I was trimming dead heads off the roses when I looked up and saw David watching me through the kitchen window. He didn't wave, didn't smile, just watched. That's when I knew. I was a target, not a mother. He thought I was slow, that I couldn't follow the paper trail he left in the trash can or figure out how to rewind the voicemail on the house phone. But baby, I raised goats and grandkids. I've seen tricks from both. That afternoon, I stood in front of the hallway mirror and said it out loud. You are not confused, you are not weak, and you are not going to disappear. Then I got to work. I dug out the old kitchen clock, one of those bulky wooden ones James bought at a flea market back in '86. I'd hidden birthday money in it once. Now I tucked a recorder inside, just in case David slipped, just in case I needed proof. I reread the fake deed, highlighted what didn't match my old signature, printed out emails he'd left open on my computer when he thought I couldn't figure out passwords. He still used the dog's name from high school, Charlie 07. Then I made an appointment with Richard, our family lawyer. Quiet man, never gossiped, always brought his own pen. I told him everything, showed him the jar of tea, the recordings, the notes I'd made. He never interrupted, just listened. At the end, he asked, "What do you want to do, Martha?" I looked him in the eye. I want my son to know that I'm not the fool he thinks I am, and I want my land to be untouchable. So we rewrote my will. We drafted a full transfer to the Midwest Conservation Trust, every acre, protected, forever. And then I did the hardest thing of all. I sat across from David at dinner that night, smiled, and let him think the plan was still working. He passed me another cup of tea, and I took it in both hands like I didn't know, like I wasn't already holding the match he'd lit himself. And Lord help him, he never saw the fire coming. I let him set the stage. Let David bring his papers, his notary friend, his folders filled with tabs and confidence. I nodded at the right moments, acted confused when he explained what witness signature meant. I even asked twice, "Now, where exactly do I sign again, honey?" He ate it up. Thought he had me wrapped up like a casserole dish on church night. What he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that I'd swapped the folder. The documents he brought had been slipped into a different binder when he went to take a call on the porch. What he signed that afternoon, grinning like the devil with a deal, was a voluntary relinquishment of all inheritance rights. And I'd filmed it. Not on my phone. That'd be too obvious. I used James' old camcorder, still working, still sharp, tucked behind a stack of National Geographics on the shelf, a wide-angle view of David Weller signing away everything with his own smug hand. That night, I baked a peach cobbler, real butter, fresh cinnamon, golden and honest, just like the truth I'd been cooking. We sat in the living room, lights low, crickets humming out past the screened porch. "I feel bad, Ma," he said, mouth full of cobbler, "leaving you alone all those years." I smiled, tilted my head. "We all do what we think is right at the time." He nodded, like that was forgiveness. But it wasn't. He never once apologized for the forged deed, for the sedatives in my tea, for assuming the woman who taught him to tie his shoes wouldn't notice her life being stripped down to paper. Let him believe he'd won. Let him hum as he washed his plate, ask me if I needed anything before bed. And in the quiet of my room, with the window cracked just enough to let in the soft rustle of wheat, I pulled out my ledger and wrote, "David signed, recording secured, will transferred, tea jar in freezer, no confrontation, just the truth." That's the thing about men like him. They're so used to women breaking down, they don't recognize a woman who's standing still on purpose. I don't need a scene. I don't need revenge. What I need is to leave the gate open long enough for him to walk straight into the consequences. And he did, with a thank you on his lips and a ticking clock in my hands. The last morning dawned still. No birds, no breeze, the kind of quiet that settles before something ends. David came downstairs late, rubbing sleep from his eyes like he hadn't just spent the past week plotting my erasure. He poured himself coffee in the mug that used to be James's, the one with the chipped handle. No permission asked. "Big day, huh?" he said. "You sure you're ready to sign everything today?" I smiled into my tea. "Oh, yes, I feel clearer than I have in years." He didn't catch it. He never did. He thought clarity came from him, from control, from sedatives. But it came from truth. And truth was already in motion. At 10 o'clock, Laura arrived. My neighbor, my oldest friend, the keeper of my real tea jars and my calm. 10 minutes later, Richard pulled into the driveway, his leather briefcase in hand. He greeted David with a polite nod and handed me the final documents. They weren't what David thought. They were what I'd already signed and notarized 2 days earlier. The final transfer of the land to the Midwest Conservation Trust. Every acre protected, every tree untouchable. James's name etched into the preservation clause. David's smile faded as he read the header. His lips moved like he was trying to sound out betrayal. This isn't the paperwork I gave you." "No," I said. "It's not. You can't. This land, Ma, this was supposed to... It was never yours," I said, voice quiet as wind through wheat. "It was mine. I just let you near it." Then I handed him a second envelope. Inside, a copy of the form he'd signed on camera, voluntarily giving up all claims to my estate. "You tricked me," he spat. "No," I said. "You tricked yourself." When Richard and Laura stood, David didn't. He just stared at the papers like they'd burst into flames if he blinked hard enough. But nothing burned. Not the land, not the home, only his illusions. That night, I sat on the porch with my tea, real tea, peppermint and peace, and watched the porch light flicker on. This story won't make headlines. No one will clap. But justice? Justice doesn't need applause. It only needs to be quietly complete. If this story reached something in you, if you've ever felt erased, unheard, or replaced, tell me, what would you do when your silence is mistaken for weakness? Let's talk. I'm listening.